Game Week 11, Day 2, Children of the Rift, Vault 43. The descent begins. Part 1, Descent into Vault 43. 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Stabilizer Chamber, Annunaki Vault Depths. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 10 a.m. The studio hums with quiet anticipation as Steve, GM, spreads updated breachglass vault maps across the table. Kristen, Greta, tightens her gauntlets, while Michael, Marcus, flips his breach scanner to standby mode. Bill, Jonah, leans back in his chair, flicking a breach die between his fingers, and Jessica, Nyx, scrolls through vault schematics on her data slate. A low hum from the AR crucible pulses softly, casting shifting vault projections across the room. Steve, GM. The stabilizer gate seals shut behind you, locking out the Martian sunlight. The faint hum of breach glass echoes through the chamber as glyphs flicker to life along the walls. Vault 43's depths await, but the stabilizer's resonance grows unstable. Ramses II's voice crackles through the metasphere. Jonah, Bill, grinning. Great. Last time we followed flickering lights, I nearly lost a leg. Nyx, Jessica, calmly. You keep the leg, I'll keep the tech. Marcus, Michael, adjusting scanner. Let's just make sure we keep moving. Vaults don't wait forever. Greta, Kristen, quietly. Feels like this one's watching us. In-game, IG, Stabilizer Chamber, Vault 43. The Delvers stand at the threshold of the stabilizer chamber, breach glass pathways spiraling downward. The corridor flickers as breach anomalies pulse faintly in the distance. Marcus' scanner blinks, detecting unstable breach signatures further down. The vault hums, waiting. Ramses II's voice echoes softly through their comms. Stabilizer output at 82%. Deviation detected in corridor alignment. Recommend caution. Vault architecture, shifting. Marcus leads, scanning the glyphs along the walls while Jonah scouts ahead. Nyx adjusts her breach katana, her eyes narrowing at flickers in the shadows. Greta lingers near the stabilizer, brushing her fingertips across the breach glass. Steve, GM. You reach a junction. The pathways ahead shift slightly, illuminated by flickers of breach glass energy. Stabilized corridors branch left, while breach anomalies shimmer faintly through a narrow tunnel to the right. A maintenance vent runs overhead unmarked. Objective: descend deeper into Vault 43 while avoiding syndicate forces and stabilizing breach anomalies. Player choice. Path A. Stabilized corridors, safer route, but slower. Syndicate forces may patrol further down. Path B. Breach anomalies. High risk, fast descent. Chance to uncover relics, but may trigger breachborn attacks. Path C. Auxiliary vents. Narrow bypass, avoids syndicate patrols, but risks isolation. Path D. Breach collapse. Collapse breach glass walls, creating new paths but destabilizing vault integrity. Jonah, IG, shrugs. I say breach tunnels. Faster we get down there, faster we find relics. Marcus, IG, glancing at scanner. Breach anomalies usually mean danger. Stabilized routes might keep us from triggering half the vault. Nyx, IG, calmly. There's always the vents. Not ideal, but it might keep us hidden. Game die trigger roll. 6. No encounter triggered. Narrative progression. The Delvers move cautiously, following the stabilized corridor. Breach glass hums faintly underfoot as Marcus deciphers shifting glyphs along the way. Nyx stabilizes small anomalies that pulse along the path. Jonah keeps his breach rifle ready, eyes flicking to every corner. Game die Marcus, engineering, 15 stabilizer output holds. Game die Nyx, Arcana, 14 minor anomalies contained. As they continue, faint echoes ripple through the metasphere, distant footsteps barely audible behind breachglass walls. Greta stops suddenly, eyes narrowing at the flicker of a figure beyond the corridor's edge, gone before anyone else notices. Scroll end of session breakdown. Vault state, stabilizer holding at 82%. Breach anomalies remain faint but persistent. Syndicate signals, brief flickers detected deeper within the vault. Possible movement tracking Delver's progress. Foreshadowing, unseen figures and anomalies indicate growing vault instability. Echoes suggest entities may be observing from the shadows. Game die player impact. Marcus, engineering, 15 prevented vault destabilization, plus 50 XP. Nyx, arcana, 14 contained minor anomalies, averting potential Riftborn emergence, plus 40 XP. Jonah, perception detected flickers of movement, avoiding unnecessary conflict. Grants a temporary +1 perception next session. Next steps. Continue descent into Vault 43. Monitor breachglass anomalies. Prepare for potential syndicate encounters in unstable zones. The delvers proceed deeper into the vault, shadows flickering at the edges of their path. Whatever lies ahead, it is already aware of their presence. Part 2. Hall of the Lost Echoes. 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Hall of the Lost Echoes, Annunaki Vault Depths. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 12 p.m. Steve, GM, spreads the breachglass projection wide across the table, the shifting vault schematic casting faint prisms across the player's hands. Michael, Marcus, narrows his eyes at a pulsing red marker. Jessica, Nyx, runs her thumb along the edge of her breach katana, the blade humming faintly. Kristen, Greta, adjusts the weight of her breach gauntlets, while Bill, Jonah, spins his breach die lazily, smirking as it tumbles across the table. The studio hums softly, wrapped in the reflective glow of the metasphere projection. Steve's gaze lingers a little longer on the breachglass map, his voice dropping to that same low, steady rhythm that signals danger ahead. Steve, GM. The vault trembles slightly beneath your feet as you advance. The Hall of the Lost Echoes glitches in and out of coherence, flickering between decayed vault corridors and fractured memories of something older. As you move, you catch glimpses of yourselves in the breachglass, except the reflections are just a step behind. Jonah, Bill, grinning. So we've got breach shadows now? We should start charging rent. Marcus, Michael, eyeing the projection. Keep laughing. They might catch up. Nyx, Jessica, without glancing up. Jonah's shadow can pay in relics. Greta, Kristen, quietly. There's something else moving back there. In-game, IG, Hall of the Lost Echoes, Vault 43. The air grows colder the deeper the squad pushes into the hall. Breachglass tiles crack slightly underfoot, glowing faintly at the edges. Jonah lingers near one of the side walls, his hand brushing over faint glyph patterns etched along the surface. Greta falls a step behind, eyes narrowed as if tracing the breach reflections just out of sync with their movements. Marcus steps toward the center of the chamber, kneeling beside a series of rotating Annunaki projections that sputter intermittently. His scanner flickers, struggling to hold a steady read. Steve, GM. Marcus, the glyphs destabilize as you approach. The scanner registers low-frequency breach activity beneath the floor, and the Annunaki inscriptions ahead pulse faintly. Something about the way they shift suggests a hidden pathway, but the fragments are too unstable to read clearly. Game dice Steve, GM. Marcus, give me a breach scanning roll to lock the sequence. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 15. Steve, GM. Your scanner steadies, the the glyphs cycling into recognizable patterns. A corridor begins to manifest along the far wall, but the reflections in the breach glass shift violently. Nyx, IG, watching the flickering breach glass. Those shadows are getting closer. If we don't stabilize this, they might step through. Jonah, IG, lightly. It's fine. I've always wanted to meet myself. Greta, IG, tightening gauntlets. I think they want more than conversation. Game Dice Steve, GM. Nyx, make a dexterity roll to stabilize the breach glass anomalies. Game Die Nyx, Jessica, rolls. 18. Steve, GM. Nyx's blade glides across the breach glass, tracing the glyph lines. The anomalies pulse, then fracture and dissolve. The reflections pause, receding back into the glass for now. Narrative progression. Marcus deciphers the glyph pathway, unlocking the sealed corridor ahead. Nyx's actions stabilize the surrounding anomalies, holding the vault together for the time being. Jonah, however, lingers near one of the wall inscriptions, casually prying loose a fragment of breach glass relic from the surface. Greta watches him, but says nothing. As the vault settles, a faint voice echoes over the metasphere. Steve, GM. The corridor stretches forward, but Ramses II's voice cuts through the comms, fragmented, layered as though glitching. The breach responds to you, but echoes linger. You're not alone down here. Greta, IG, softly. I felt it too. Something's watching from the other side. Jonah, IG, with a grin. Let them watch. Maybe they'll learn something. Nyx, IG, glancing at Marcus. Or maybe we'll learn something we didn't want to. Scroll end of session breakdown. Vault state. Glyph pathways partially stabilized. Breach anomaly suppressed but lingering. Reflections. Shadow echoes flicker intermittently. Threat of reappearance remains. Foreshadowing. Ramses II's warning suggests deeper disturbances ahead. Game Die player impact. Marcus, breach scanning. 15 successfully unlocked the hidden pathway, plus 50 XP. Nyx, dexterity. 18 stabilized breach anomalies, preventing Riftborn incursion, plus 50 XP. Jonah, perception retrieved breach glass relic, plus 1 relic point next session. Next steps. Continue deeper into the vault. Voice echoes over the metasphere. Monitor breach glass pathways for destabilization. Prepare for potential reflection resurgence. The delvers advance, but their reflections linger just a step behind, waiting for the vault to shift once more. Part 3. The Outer Halls. 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Campaign Arc. Children of the Rift. Martian Front. Setting. Vault 43. Outer Halls, near core entry. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 2 p.m. Steve, GM, watches the group closely as he rotates the breach glass projection, revealing a labyrinthine schematic of the outer halls leading deeper toward the vault's core. Michael, Marcus, tilts his head slightly, skimming notes scribbled hastily in the margins of his character sheet. Jessica, Nyx, rests her chin on folded hands, watching the shifting pathways with narrowed eyes. Kristen, Greta, drums her fingers lightly on the table edge, while Bill, Jonah, taps his breach die rhythmically against his data slate. Steve, GM. The vault corridor stretches onward, narrow breach glass pathways weaving around the outer halls. Dim light flickers from wall panels long dormant, and the faint sound of boots echoes ahead. Syndicate. They haven't seen you yet. Jonah, Bill, grinning. They will. Nyx, Jessica, calm. Unless we handle this quietly. Marcus, Michael, softly. Quiet or loud, we need to control that entry point. In-game, IG, Vault 43, Outer Halls. The squad advances cautiously. The breach glass beneath their feet hums with latent energy, the faint Annunaki glyphs pulsing in time with each step. A flicker of movement catches Marcus' eye, shadows stretching unnaturally along the vaulted ceiling. Jonah presses himself to the side of the corridor, scanning ahead with his breech pistol loose in his grip. Steve, GM. As you round the next corner, you spot them. First Syndicate operatives flank a breach stabilizer, attempting to splice Annunaki tech into their own systems. Their gear glints faintly in the breach glass light, rugged, scavenged, but modified for vault incursions. One of them kneels beside the console, partially dismantling the panel. Greta, IG, low voice. They're tampering with the stabilizer. If that breaches, the whole corridor could shift. Nyx, IG, unsheathing katana quietly. Then we don't let it happen. Jonah, IG, with a smirk. I call the one with the fancy goggles. Steve, GM. You can engage directly, sabotage the panel from a distance, or attempt to manipulate the vault's metasphere to disrupt them. Game dice Steve, GM. Jonah, roll for stealth. Greta, give me a perception check. Game die Jonah, Bill rolls. 13. Game die Greta, Kristen rolls. 17. Steve, GM. Jonah shifts through the breach glass shadows, but kicks loose a fragment of debris. The Syndicate tech looks up, squinting toward the corner. Greta spots something deeper behind the Syndicate team. Faint outlines flicker in the breach glass walls. Reflections. Not theirs. Marcus, IG, voice tense. We need to move. Now. Narrative progression. Jonah ducks back as the Syndicate tech rises, scanning the area with a flickering data slate. Greta motions sharply, and the squad presses against the corridor walls. The reflections in the breach glass ripple slightly, distorted, echoes of the Delvers, but fractured and wrong. Steve, GM. One of the reflections shifts closer, lingering behind Marcus' shoulder, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. Nyx, IG, quietly. They see us. Move fast. Encounter setup. Vault defense. Syndicate engineer, elite splicing Annunaki tech, armed with metasphere gauntlet. Syndicate operatives, 2 breach rifles, stun charges, positioned defensively around stabilizer. Vault effect, breach glass anomalies shift unpredictably, influencing metasphere flow. On critical fail, reflections distort combat zones, altering movement pathways. Combat encounter cards. Scroll Syndicate Engineer, Elite. HP, 65. Defense, 17. Voice echoes over the metasphere. Abilities, Metasphere Gauntlet, disrupts breach stabilizers, splice protocol, summons reflections. Tactic, focuses on breaching tech. Retreats if health falls below 20%. Scroll Syndicate Operatives 2. HP, 35 each. Defense, 15. Abilities, Stun Charge, DC 14 to resist, Breach Rifle, +4 to attack, 1d8 +2 damage. Tactic, guard the engineer and intercept Delvers directly. Scroll Vault Anomaly, triggered by phase shift. HP, 50. Defense, 16. Abilities, Breach Reflection, mirrors Delver's attack, Rift Surge, destabilizes nearby vault sections. Tactic, disrupts metasphere flow, engages Delvers on critical anomalies. Skill Challenge, Vault Expansion and Combat Blend. Game Die Skill Check, Engineering, Marcus Success. Game Die Skill Check, Stealth, Nyx Success. Game Die Skill Check, Arcana, Greta Partial Success. Marcus stabilizes breach glass anomalies, reducing phase shift frequency. Nyx slips through the breach shadows, lining up a silent strike on the nearest operative. Greta suppresses metasphere surges temporarily, but instability lingers beneath the floor. Phase 1. Silent Approach, Nyx. Game Die Skill Check, Melee. Nyx Critical Success. Steve, GM. Nyx, as you emerge from the breachglass shadows, your katana hums faintly. The nearest operative hasn't seen you yet. How do you proceed? Nyx, Jessica. I strike quickly at the power conduit on his rifle, aiming to disable it without raising alarm. Game Die rolls 20. Critical success. Steve, GM. Your blade slices cleanly, severing the conduit. His breech rifle sparks and dies, leaving him momentarily stunned. Game Die roll damage. 2d6 plus 4 rolls 10. Operative takes 10 damage. Jonah, Bill. 1 down. 2 to go. Phase 2. Anomaly Disruption. Greta. Game Die Skill Check, Arcana. Greta Partial Success. Steve, GM. Greta. The vault pulses beneath you, breach glass flickering with unstable energy. An anomaly begins to form. What do you do? Greta, Kristen. I focus on suppressing it with breach fire runes. Game Die rolls 14, partial success. Steve, GM. The anomaly shrinks but lingers, destabilizing the corridor slightly. Pathways around you shift. Marcus, Michael. We need to lock this down before it escalates. Game Die anomaly rolls for Rift Surge. Attack 1d20 plus 4 roll 16. Hits Greta. Game Die damage. 1d8 plus 3 rolls 7. Greta takes 7 damage. Phase 3. Stabilizer Control, Marcus. Game Die Skill Check, Engineering, Marcus Success. Steve, GM. Marcus, the stabilizer hums violently as the syndicate engineer continues his work. How do you respond? Marcus, Michael. I redirect breach energy to reinforce the pathways, locking out their splice attempts. Game Die rolls 18, success. Game Die damage to stabilizer. 2d8 plus 4 rolls 12. Steve, GM. Breach glass seals snap into place, slowing syndicate progress. Phase 4, Counterattack, Syndicate Operatives. Game Die Operative 1, Breach Rifle rolls 15. Hits Jonah. Game Die damage. 1d8 plus 2, rolls 6. Jonah takes 6 damage. Game Die Operative 2, Stun Charge rolls 12. Misses Nyx. Jonah, Bill. You missed me. Try again. Phase 5. Tactical Response. Jonah. Game Die Skill Check. Ranged. Jonah Success. Steve, GM. Jonah. The engineer shifts focus to the metasphere gauntlet, charging a blast. What's your move? Jonah, Bill. I fire a breach pulse straight at the stabilizer's core, aiming for feedback. Game Die rolls 17, success. Game Die damage. 1d10 plus 3 rolls 9. Steve, GM. Your shot connects. A pulse ripples out, knocking the engineer off the platform. Outcome. Vault secured. Ilya retreats. Stabilizer destabilization forces the syndicate to pull back. Breach glass echoes intensify. Reflections stir in the vault's shadows, hinting at further anomalies. Pathway expansion. New corridors unlock, but vault energy fields remain unstable. Outcome. The syndicate forces split, one tech remaining at the stabilizer while the others move to investigate. The squad has moments to act, attack, disable the stabilizer remotely, or manipulate the metasphere to unleash the reflections against the syndicate. Scroll End of Session Breakdown. Vault State. Syndicate operatives detected at breach stabilizer. Reflections appearing behind the delvers. Foreshadowing. Reflection echoes suggest instability. Syndicate tampering may escalate breach anomalies. Game Die player impact. Greta Perception. 17 detected hidden reflections early, plus 50 XP. Jonah, stealth, 13 minor alert triggered. Syndicate aware, but not fully engaged, plus 25 XP. Next steps. Engage or bypass syndicate forces. Monitor breach stabilizer activity. Prepare for potential reflection convergence. The vault grows restless as syndicate interference disturbs the balance. The delvers have little time before the breach shifts. Part 4. The Riftborn Convergence. 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Core Approach, Antechamber to Stabilizer Rift. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 4 p.m. Steve, GM, leans forward, arms resting on the edge of the table, eyes scanning the players' faces. Michael, Marcus, adjusts his dice, arranging them in neat lines. Jessica, Nyx, flicks the breachglass token between her fingers, gaze fixed on the projection of the vault corridors. Kristen, Greta, scribbles quick notes on her data slate, while Bill, Jonah, exhales, pretending to stretch, but clearly ready for the next push. Steve, GM. The aftermath of the syndicate engagement leaves the stabilizer intact, but as you regroup, the vault begins to shift. The breach glass walls vibrate, faint ripples distorting the space ahead. Something else is here now. Jonah, Bill, leaning forward. That's usually when we run, right? Nyx, Jessica, softly. Or we face it. Marcus, Michael, checking scanner. We're too close to stop now. Let's move. In-game, IG, Vault 43, Core Antechamber. The squad stands at the edge of the antechamber leading into the vault stabilizer rift. Dim light spills from breach glass veins, illuminating the widening rift at the chamber's heart. Shadows spiral unnaturally across the walls, stretching and twisting with each breath the squad takes. Steve, GM. The breach glass pulses softly beneath your feet. Marcus' scanner flickers, unreadable signatures flooding the screen. Nyx feels it first, like a thread pulling in the back of her mind. The stabilizer isn't just damaged. It's drawing something in. Greta, IG, eyes narrowing. Riftborn. Marcus, IG, voice low. Confirm it. Steve, GM. Jonah, give me a perception roll. Greta, roll for breach sensitivity. Game die Jonah, Bill rolls. 14. Game die Greta, Kristen rolls. 16. Steve, GM. Jonah, you catch faint movement near the stabilizer, shadows pooling unnaturally. Greta, the rift shifts. Riftborn activity confirmed. Nyx, IG raising katana, blade humming. They're already here. Narrative progression. The squad advances as Riftborn entities phase into existence, distorted echoes of syndicate operatives lost to previous vault incursions. Breach glass cracks underfoot, and the vault begins to destabilize. Marcus signals for caution, but Jonah moves ahead, ready to engage. Steve, GM. The stabilizer hums violently as Riftborn manifest, fractured, incomplete, yet drawn to the rift's instability. Their forms flicker unnaturally, each step echoing like static against the metasphere. Player options. Engage Riftborn directly. Combat the Riftborn to prevent further destabilization. Stabilize the rift. Marcus and Nyx attempt to manually recalibrate the stabilizer mid-combat. Manipulate the metasphere. Greta draws breach glass anomalies into the fight, risking backlash. Marcus, IG, gritting teeth. We stabilize that rift, or we don't leave. Jonah, IG, laughing. Let's make sure it doesn't stabilize us first. Encounter setup. Location, Vault 43, Core Stabilizer Chamber. Time, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., Simulacrum Studios, in-game. Players, Marcus, Nyx, Jonah, Greta. Enemies, 2 Echo Stalkers, 1 Riftborn Revenant. Scenario: Stabilizer Defense. Overview. The squad faces Riftborn entities materializing around the core stabilizer. These entities are echoes of Syndicate operatives lost in previous breaches, distorted and unstable. The encounter blends direct combat with environmental risks, forcing the Delvers to either stabilize the rift or fight back the Riftborn while the vault continues to shift around them. Objective: defend the stabilizer from Riftborn attacks. Recalibrate the stabilizer to prevent catastrophic breachglass collapse. Environmental conditions. Breachglass instability. Each round, the stabilizer may trigger breachglass fractures, forcing dexterity checks to avoid hazards. Metasphere anomalies. Failed stabilizer recalibrations or anomaly manipulations risk triggering additional Riftborn manifestations. Phase escalation. At the start of each round, roll a d6. On a 5 or 6, a breachglass anomaly destabilizes the area, applying random penalties or summoning additional Riftborn echoes. Riftborn entity breakdown. Echo Stalker. 2 agile Riftborn that phase in and out of breachglass walls. They target Marcus and Nyx first, prioritizing those attempting to stabilize the rift. Riftborn Revenant. 1 a larger, more unstable Riftborn that attacks indiscriminately, threatening to overload the stabilizer if not dealt with quickly. Behavior. The Riftborn are drawn to breach anomalies, disrupting any attempt to control the metasphere. Each round, the stabilizer grows more unstable if left unguarded. Combat encounter cards. Scroll Echo Stalker. HP 40. Defense 15. Abilities. Rift Phase. 50% chance to avoid physical attacks. Breach Strike. +3 to attack. 1d8 damage. Tactic. Targets players interacting with the stabilizer. Scroll Riftborn Revenant. HP 75. Catastrophic breachglass collapse. Defense 18. Abilities. Breach Surge. AoE 2d6. Rift Smash. +5 to attack. 2d8 +2 damage. Tactic. Unleashes powerful area attacks. Prioritizes destabilizing the metasphere over dealing direct damage. Phase 1. Initiative rolls. Blade humming. They're already here. Out of game. OG. Steve, GM, leans over the table, glancing at the players. Alright, let's roll initiative. These Riftborn aren't going to wait for pleasantries. Game Die Jonah. Stealth/perception game die 17. Jonah spots Riftborn movement early, gaining an advantage. Game die Greta. Breach sensitivity/combat game die 16. Greta senses breachglass anomalies reacting to the Riftborn. Game die Marcus. Engineering/combat game die 15. Marcus prepares breach stabilizers for defensive measures. Game die Nyx. Dexterity/combat game die 6. Nyx reacts slower, catching movement too late. Game die Echo Stalker 1. Game die 9. Game die Echo Stalker 2. Game die 19. The second Riftborn lunges immediately, targeting Nyx. Game die Riftborn Revenant. Game die 14. Jonah, Bill. Looks like I'm first to dance. Don't get jealous. Nyx, Jessica. Grinning. I'll let you take the first swing. I'll finish it. Phase 2. Combat Round 1. Steve, GM. Marcus, the stabilizer sparks as breachglass pulses ripple outward. You're up first. Game die Marcus. Engineering game die 2. Marcus fumbles with stabilizer controls. Marcus, Michael. Damn it. The stabilizer's fighting back. Steve, GM. You pull a cable loose by mistake. The stabilizer flickers and destabilizes slightly. Game die Nyx. Attack game die 8. Nyx swings her katana but misses. Nyx, Jessica. It phased right through him. This is going to be fun. Game die Jonah. Attack game die 7. Jonah's shot glances off breach glass. Jonah, Bill. You call that cover? I had a clear shot. Game die Greta. Support game die 8. Greta tries to channel anomalies but fails. Phase 3. Combat round 2. Steve, GM. Marcus, recalibrate. Nix, Jonah, keep the stalkers off him. Game die Marcus. Engineering game die 18. Marcus recalibrates stabilizer, reinforcing vault defenses. Marcus, Michael. Got it. Stabilizer is responding. Game die Nix. Attack game die 16. Nix lands a clean strike. Nix, Jessica. I told you I'd handle it. Game die Jonah. Attack game die 8. Jonah grazes the Riftborn. Jonah, Bill. Better than nothing. Game die Echo Stalker. Counter game die 15. Marcus is hit by a breach strike, taking 6 damage. Game die Riftborn Revenant. AoE game die 14. Greta and Jonah are caught in breach surge, taking 9 damage each. Phase 4. Combat round 3 continuation. Steve, GM. The Revenant surges with breach energy again. Marcus, stabilizer holding, but they're not letting up. Game die Marcus, engineering. Stabilizer control game die 12. Stabilizer holds, but does not advance further. Marcus, Michael. I can keep it steady, but someone needs to handle those stalkers. Game die Nix. Attack on Echo Stalker 2 game die 9. Nix's blade slices, but the rift phase activates, having the damage. Nix, Jessica. It's like cutting mist. Jonah, any day now. Game die Jonah. Attack on Revenant game die 10. Jonah lands a shot, but it barely scratches the Revenant. Jonah, Bill. Hey, at least I hit it. Game die Greta. Support. Anomaly control game die 7. Greta tries to control metasphere flows but fails. Greta, Kristen. I can't get a grip on this breach energy. It's too chaotic. Game die phase 4. Enemy actions. Echo Stalker 1. Attack on Marcus game die 13. Marcus takes another breach strike, dealing 5 damage. Echo Stalker 2. Attack on Nix game die 6. Nix avoids the second stalker's attack. Riftborn Revenant. Breach surge. AoE game die 16. AoE pulse hits all players, dealing 11 damage. Jonah, Bill, gritting his teeth. I really hate that thing. Marcus, Michael. I'm barely keeping this stabilizer together. Phase 5. Combat round 4. Escalation. Game die phase escalation roll. Game die 6. Breach glass anomaly triggers. A third Echo Stalker begins to manifest. Steve, GM. Jonah, Marcus. More company incoming. Handle this quick. Game die Marcus. Engineering. Stabilizer overload game die 19. Marcus forces breach energy back into the stabilizer, stopping the anomaly. Marcus, Michael. Not today. Game die Nix. Critical attack on Revenant game die 20. Nix's katana cuts through the Revenant's core, dissipating its form. Nix, Jessica. I told you. Finish it. Game die Jonah. Finishing shot on Echo Stalker 1 game die 18. Jonah fires a breach round, dispersing the remaining stalker. Jonah, Bill. Finally. Can we go now? Steve, GM, nodding. The Revenant flickers as Nix's blade tears through it. Marcus, the stabilizer pulses brightly. Breach energy returns to equilibrium. Outcome, final resolution. Vault secured. Stabilizer fully operational. Anomalies subside. Loot. I knew it. Riftborn Core X2. Stabilizer shard. Echo Fragment. Enhances breach weapon damage +1. Greta, Kristen, exhaling. I hope that's the last of them. Marcus, Michael. I wouldn't count on it. Let's move. Jonah, Bill. At least we didn't blow up the stabilizer this time. Scroll end of session breakdown. Vault status. Stabilizer partially compromised but secured post-engagement. Riftborn presence remains unstable. Foreshadowing. The stabilizer continues to draw echoes of past breaches, hinting at deeper metasphere disturbances. Key loot. Riftborn core. 1. Stabilizer data fragment. 1. Game die player impact. Greta. Breach sensitivity. 16 detected Riftborn early, preventing surprise attack, plus 50 XP. Jonah. Perception. 14 identified initial Riftborn shadows, providing tactical advantage, plus 25 XP. Next steps. Confront the Riftborn entities drawn to the stabilizer. Investigate metasphere echoes disrupting vault integrity. Secure remaining breachglass stabilizers. The vault stirs as the rift echoes linger, their shapes flickering just beyond sight. Intermission. Vault synth and disco balls. Time. 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Location. Simulacrum Studios. Player break. Studio kitchen. Out of game. OG. The lights flicker briefly across the studio as Steve, GM, leans back, rubbing his temples with a satisfied grin. The breachglass projection fades to a low shimmer on the table. Bill, Jonah, stretches dramatically, tossing his breach die onto the table where it rolls lazily before coming to a stop. Jessica, Nyx, closes her eyes, head resting on folded arms, while Michael, Marcus, quietly recalibrates his data slate. Kristen, Greta, flips her notebook closed, tapping it against the edge of the table with a thoughtful expression. The faint scent of food drifts in from the studio kitchen. Tonight's break meal consists of loaded nachos, grilled sandwiches, and Marcus special chili, a tradition among the Delvers during long sessions. Steve, GM. All right, good work. You held that stabilizer longer than I expected. Thought for sure Greta was going to get dragged into the metasphere. Jonah, Bill, laughing. It's not too late. The Riftborn still owe her one. Greta, Kristen, rolling eyes. They can take a number. I'm dealing with them one breach at a time. Nyx, Jessica, groaning softly. I swear those things get uglier every week. Marcus, Michael, without looking up. You're just getting better at seeing them. Time, 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Location, Simulacrum Studios. Player break. Out of game. OG. The lights flicker briefly across the studio as Steve, GM, leans back, rubbing his temples with a satisfied grin. The breachglass projection fades to a low shimmer on the table. Bill, Jonah, stretches dramatically, tossing his breach die onto the table where it rolls lazily before coming to a stop. Jessica, Nyx, closes her eyes, head resting on folded arms, while Michael, Marcus, quietly recalibrates his data slate. Kristen, Greta, flips her notebook closed, tapping it against the edge of the table with a thoughtful expression. Steve, GM. All right, good work. You held that stabilizer longer than I expected. Thought for sure Greta was going to get dragged into the metasphere. Jonah, Bill, laughing. It's not too late. The Riftborn still owe her one. Greta, Kristen, rolling eyes. They can take a number. I'm dealing with them one breach at a time. Nyx, Jessica, groaning softly. I swear those things get uglier every week. Marcus, Michael, without looking up. You're just getting better at seeing them. In-game reflection. The vault's corridors hum faintly as the Riftborn recede into breachglass shadows, leaving behind faint scorch marks and the eerie echoes of their passage. The stabilizer pulses in slow, steady rhythms, holding the vault structure firm for now. As the squad regroups, the weight of the encounter lingers, each step forward feeling heavier. Dynamic intermission scene. Playlist roll-off. Steve, GM. Alright, someone's got to pick the break music. Let's roll off. Highest picks. The players each roll their breach dice, one by one. Bill grins as his die lands first. Game die Bill, Jonah 17. Game die Jessica, Nix 12. Game die Michael, Marcus 9. Game die Kristen, Greta 14. Jonah, Bill. Laughing, raising both hands, vault synth, baby. The vibes are about to get immaculate. Nix, Jessica. Lifting her head, could be worse. Phoenix AI, playfully chiming in. Activating vault synth mode. Oh, and deploying disco ball. Let's get festive. A holographic disco ball lowers from the ceiling. Bill immediately jumps to his feet, striking a ridiculous pose. Jonah, Bill. It's showtime. Tina Fey, sipping coffee from the corner, unexpectedly joins in with finger guns and exaggerated head bobs. Steve, GM. I swear, this is why I don't run breaks. Ramses, shut off the disco ball. Ramses II, soft voiceover comms. No, this pleases me. Marcus, Michael. Grinning. I say we let it ride. Metasphere event. As Jonah's music cues up, faint distortion crackles over the breach glass projection. A soft hum echoes through the metasphere interface, faint but insistent. Steve, GM. That humming's not part of the playlist. Ramses, what are we hearing? Ramses II. Unknown. But I would keep listening. Sometimes the vault hums back. Greta, Kristen. Narrowing eyes, that's comforting. Marcus, Michael. Next break, we're picking whale noises. At least they don't talk back. Player actions, loot, and midday mechanics. Jonah. Gains breach stabilizer shard, X1, a fragment that provides +1 defense during the next stabilizer encounter. Jonah claims it with dramatic flair, pocketing it while humming his own theme. Greta. Suffers metasphere burn, mild. The strain of breach glass manipulation leaves Greta's connection weakened. Her anomaly rolls take a -1 penalty until treated. Kristen jots this down with a sigh. Marcus. Upgrades his engineering tools, +1 stabilizer rolls. Michael spends downtime recalibrating gear, quietly reinforcing Marcus' loadout for the next phase. Nix. Finds breach flow circuit, enhances melee damage for 1 encounter. Jessica rolls her eyes as Steve drops the loot card onto the table. Nix, Jessica. Convenient. I'll take it. Foreshadowing, GM notes. The stabilizer's pulse fluctuates slightly, signs of deeper vault anomaly stirring. Ramses II's voice may return in the next phase, hinting at further vault disturbances. Riftborn echoes linger in breach glass shadows, awaiting opportunities to resurface. Next phase, proceed to Part 5, Core Descent and Breach Glass Tunnels. Part 5, Core Descent and Breach Glass Tunnels. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Core Descent, Breach Glass Tunnels. 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 6:30 p.m. Steve, GM, shifts the breach glass projection to reveal the lower sections of Vault 43, shadows curling around the edges of the displayed map. The studio hums with quiet tension. Bill, Jonah, flips his breach die, eyes narrowed at the unfolding vault layout. Kristen, Greta, reviews her notes, while Jessica, Nix, adjusts the angle of her breach katana on the character sheet. Michael, Marcus, studies breach stabilizer schematics, tapping his pencil against his notepad. Steve, GM. The descent into the core has begun. The breach glass tunnels stretch ahead, winding like veins deeper into Vault 43's belly. As you move forward, the glow from the stabilizer fades, leaving only the cold pulse of the metasphere to light your way. The path ahead is uneven, fractured by shifting layers of breach glass, but it holds, for now. Nix, Jessica, quietly. I don't like the sound of for now. Marcus, Michael, focused. Let's make sure it stays that way. Jonah, Bill, grinning. You always say that right before something explodes. In-game, IG, Vault 43, breach glass tunnels. The squad steps carefully along the breach glass pathways, their reflections twisting unnaturally beneath them. The tunnels seem to hum in response to their movement. Marcus leads, his breach scanner flickering with unstable signals. Greta follows, tracing faint Annunaki glyphs along the walls, while Jonah walks a few paces behind, scanning for signs of syndicate activity. Nix lingers at the rear, blade at the ready. Steve, GM. As you pass through the narrowing corridor, faint echoes drift through the tunnel, soft, distant footsteps that don't belong to any of you. The stabilizer node up ahead flickers, glitching in and out of sync with the vault's pulse. Greta, IG, tense. There's something ahead. I can feel it. Marcus, IG, adjusting breach scanner. I'm picking up something unstable. Riftborn, maybe, or worse. Jonah, IG, or worse. We're skipping that part, right? Game die Greta, Kristen, rolls. 15, Arcana, breach sensitivity. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 14, Engineering, vault stability check. Game die Nix, Jessica, rolls. 18, Perception, track movement. The vault hums louder as the squad approaches the stabilizer node. Annunaki glyphs ripple faintly along the corridor walls, illuminating strange patterns that briefly resemble faces before fading. Greta's gaze lingers on one for a moment too long. Greta, IG, softly. I swear I saw someone. Nix, IG, without turning. You didn't. Just shadows. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 16, Engineering, stabilizer adjustment. Game die Nix, Jessica, rolls. 19, Stealth, silent approach. Game die Jonah, Bill, rolls. 12, Arcana, metasphere manipulation. Game die Greta, Kristen, rolls. 13, Survival, environmental awareness. Narrative progression. Nix glides ahead, her steps soundless against the glass-like surface. She vanishes into the shadows as the squad watches from behind. Marcus kneels by the stabilizer, tools in hand, while Jonah's gauntlet hums with low-frequency metasphere energy. As Marcus begins recalibrating, faint distortions ripple through the air. Nix halts abruptly. Up ahead, a figure stands at the edge of the stabilizer light, watching. The reflection in the breach glass reveals nothing but an empty tunnel. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 11, Intelligence, identify vault signature. Game die Jonah, Bill, rolls. 9, Dexterity, reaction check. Greta, IG, whispering. I see them now. There's someone else down here. Marcus, IG, grim. Stay sharp. Jonah, IG, tense. I'm ready to pull the metasphere trigger if things get too weird. Steve, GM. As Marcus secures the stabilizer node, a low-frequency pulse spreads through the vault. Riftborn signatures flicker faintly, dancing along the breach glass like distorted shadows. Nix signals silently to the squad, her hand hovering just over her blade. The vault feels heavier now, and the echoes ahead grow louder. Jonah's gauntlet trembles slightly, as if the metasphere itself is responding to his presence. The stabilizer pulses again, stabilizing part of the breach glass tunnel behind them, but the path ahead remains uncertain. Scroll session breakdown. Ol key loot. Riftborn fragment. X1. Stabilizer data cache. Face with monocle key clues. Faint Annunaki glyphs show distorted faces that flicker briefly. Stabilizer flickers suggest interference from external forces deeper in the vault. Crystal ball foreshadowing. Riftborn movement increases deeper within the vault. An unknown entity watches from afar. Next steps. Continue recalibrating vault stabilizers. Investigate strange metasphere pulses. Prepare for deeper descent into Vault 43. Proceed to Part 6, the Vault's Heart. Part 6, Encounter at the Vault Core. 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Core Chamber. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 8:30 p.m. Steve, GM, adjusts the breachglass projection, zooming in on the vault's central core chamber. The hologram flickers as metasphere interference grows stronger. Bill, Jonah, drums his fingers on the table while Jessica, Nix, sharpens a pencil, sketching out tactical layouts. Kristen, Greta, and Michael, Marcus, quietly exchange theories about Annunaki tech as Steve flips open a random event table. Steve, GM. You reach the heart of Vault 43. The stabilizer hums loudly behind you, but the tunnel widens into a sprawling chamber. Large rifts in the breach glass reveal twisted metasphere energy pulsing faintly. At the center, an ancient Annunaki core spins slowly, half submerged in breach glass. The chamber feels alive. Jonah, Bill, leaning in. Alive usually means trouble. Greta, Kristen, grinning. Alive means loot. In-game, IG, Vault 43, Vault Core. The squad steps forward cautiously, the flickering breach glass casting fractured reflections across the room. Marcus holds up his gauntlet, scanning for distortions. Nix's katana hums faintly as she crouches low, watching the far end of the chamber where shadows dance unnaturally. Game die Steve rolls for random encounter. 14. Minor Riftborn disturbance. Game die Jonah, Bill rolls. 16. Perception. Detect Riftborn. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 12. Engineering. Stabilizer status. Game die Nix, Jessica, rolls. 17. Dexterity. Avoid Riftborn detection. Game die Greta, Kristen, rolls. 11. Arcana. Metasphere awareness. Steve, GM. Jonah, your skin picks up movement in the breach glass. Riftborn echoes flicker near the core. They haven't fully manifested yet, but they're watching. Nix, IG, softly. We can take them out now or wait and see. Marcus, IG, adjusting gauntlet. Stabilizers holding steady. No breach anomalies, but this area is volatile. Jonah, IG, loading breach pistol. If we wait, they'll multiply. Player options. Engage the Riftborn now. Surprise the Riftborn before they fully manifest. Observe the core. Allow the Riftborn to linger while focusing on the Annunaki core. Manipulate the metasphere. Greta attempts to interact directly with the metasphere energy surrounding the core. Game die Nix, Jessica, rolls. 15. Attack, engage Riftborn. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 18. Arcana, core analysis. Game die Jonah, Bill, rolls. 14. Dexterity, tactical positioning. Game die Greta, Kristen, rolls. 16. Arcana, metasphere control. Narrative progression. Nix lunges forward, slicing through the flickering Riftborn form, disrupting its manifestation. Marcus kneels by the core, analyzing the spinning Annunaki relic. Jonah shifts to cover Nix, positioning himself between her and emerging breach glass shadows. Greta channels breach energy, stabilizing the metasphere disturbances temporarily. Game die Steve rolls for additional random event. 19. Vault core distortion, unstable phase shift. Steve, GM. As Greta stabilizes the metasphere, the core pulses violently, triggering a phase shift. The chamber distorts, and Riftborn reinforcements begin to surface. Scenario: Vault Core Phase Shift Event. Encounter Setup. Environmental instability. The Vault Core is phasing between metasphere states, creating unpredictable breaches. Primary threat. Riftborn reinforcements manifest from breachglass rifts. Objective: defend the stabilizer node and prevent full breach destabilization. Player advantage. Nyx successfully disrupted one Riftborn, granting the squad surprise initiative. Enemies. 2 Riftborn Spectres, fast, low health, high dodge. 1 Riftborn Brute, heavy armor, slow, high damage output. Riftborn enemy cards. Shield Riftborn Spectre. Health, 20. Armor class, AC 16. Speed, 40 feet, phasing movement. Attack, Rift Claw, 1d8 plus 3 breach energy, phases through armor on 18+. Special ability, Ethereal Drift. Once per turn, the Spectre may phase into breachglass, becoming immune to physical attacks until the start of its next turn. Weakness, disrupted by arcane or metasphere-based attacks. Tactics, avoids direct confrontation, strikes from shadows, and relies on speed to wear down delvers. Shield Riftborn Brute. Health, 60. Armor class, AC 18. Speed, 25 feet. Attack, Breach Slam. 2d12 plus 5 breach energy, knockback 10 feet on 15+. Special ability, Vault Breaker. Brute's attacks deal double damage to vault structures and stabilizers. Weakness, sluggish when destabilized. Critical strikes reduce movement by 10 feet until recalibrated. Tactics, engages head-on, prioritizing the stabilizer node and Marcus. Relies on brute strength to overwhelm. Phase 1, Initiative Rolls. Game Die Nyx, Jessica, rolls. 19, Stealth, Surprise Attack. Game Die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 14, Engineering, Vault Stabilizer Prep. Game Die Jonah, Bill, rolls. 16, Perception, Tactical Assessment. Game Die Greta, Kristen, rolls. 11, Arcana, Metasphere Surge Detection. Game Die Riftborn Spectre 1 rolls. 12, Speed. Game Die Riftborn Spectre 2 rolls. 8, Speed. Game Die Riftborn Brute rolls. 10, Strength. Phase 2, Combat Round 1. Nyx, attack Game Die 18. Nyx lands a critical strike, eliminating Spectre 1 before full manifestation. Marcus, engineering Game Die 15, stabilizer node reinforced, reducing metasphere instability by 10%. Jonah, support/attack Game Die 12, Jonah fires, grazing the Riftborn Brute, minor damage. Greta, Arcana Game Die 13, Greta channels metasphere energy, temporarily halting Spectre 2's manifestation. Spectre 2, attack Game Die 14, Spectre phases, narrowly missing Jonah. Riftborn Brute, charge Game Die 17, Brute charges Marcus, dealing heavy breach energy damage. Phase 3, Environmental Event. Game Die Trigger Roll. 3, Environmental Breachglass Shift. The breachglass floor beneath Marcus and Greta fractures, causing hazardous terrain. Marcus, dexterity check Game Die 14. Marcus dodges falling debris and stabilizes near the vault node. Greta, dexterity check Game Die 10. Greta stumbles, taking 6 breach energy damage from falling shards. Jonah pulls Greta to safety. Game Die 16. Phase 4, Combat Round 2. Nyx, attack Game Die 11. Nyx misses as Spectre 2 phases again. Marcus, defense Game Die 13. Marcus stabilizes, reducing breach damage from the Brute. Jonah, attack game die 16. Jonah lands a precise shot, damaging the brute further. Greta, Arcana game die 18. Greta disrupts the metasphere, forcing Spectre 2 to manifest fully. Spectre 2, attack game die 10. Misses Marcus by inches. Riftborn Brute, slam game die 15. Brute's attack damages the stabilizer node. 10% destabilization. Phase 5 Climax. Marcus initiates vault-wide recalibration. Game die 18. Vault stabilizer fully recalibrated. Nyx and Jonah perform a coordinated strike. Game die 19. The brute collapses under combined fire. Greta channels the metasphere to force Riftborn echoes back into breachglass. Game die 16. Outcome. Success. The vault stabilizer holds, Riftborn threats neutralized, and metasphere activity recedes. Failure. Vault destabilization escalates, triggering further phase shifts and vault anomalies. Scroll session breakdown. Ol key loot. Riftborn core shard, X1. Vault stabilizer upgrade module. Face with monocle key clues. Riftborn seem unusually drawn to the Annunaki core. The vault core shows signs of prior manipulation. Glyphs flicker with faint traces of syndicate activity. Crystal ball foreshadowing. Riftborn activity increases within the vault, hinting at greater disturbances ahead. The phase shift suggests the vault's core is reacting to the Delver's presence. Next steps. Confront Riftborn reinforcements as they manifest. Investigate syndicate traces near the vault core. Attempt to stabilize the vault core and prevent further disturbances. Proceed to Part 7, Riftborn confrontation at the vault core. Part 8, Vault exit and stabilizer recap. 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Campaign arc, Children of the Rift, Martian front. Setting, Vault 43, core chamber and exit tunnels. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 11:30 p.m. The room quiets as Steve, GM, lowers his notes. The breachglass projection flickers gently, casting ghostly patterns across the table. Jonah, Phil, stretches, leaning back as the weight of the session lifts. Greta, Kristen, traces metasphere runes onto her notepad while Marcus, Michael, adjusts stabilizer schematics. Nyx, Jessica, sharpens her blade absent-mindedly, the faint hum fading slowly. Steve, GM. The vault size in relief, but only for now. The stabilizer hums at 90% efficiency, but faint ripples of metasphere energy still flicker along the breachglass floor. The vault remembers, and it's watching. Jonah, Phil. Smirking, feels too easy. When do the real ghosts show up? Greta, Kristen. Sighing, Jonah, you're not wrong. The vault's holding back. I can feel it. In-game, IG, Vault 43, Stabilizer Chamber. The stabilizer hums quietly, its glow casting long shadows along the chamber walls. Cracks spiderweb across the breachglass underfoot, but for now, they seem stable. Jonah kneels beside the vault's entrance, breach rifle resting across his knee, eyes scanning the far corridor. Greta lingers near the stabilizer, fingertips glowing faintly as she traces residual metasphere energy. Marcus crouches by the stabilizer node, fingers flying across a control panel, while Nyx stands at the perimeter, blade in hand, eyes sharp. Game die Marcus, Michael, rolls. 16. Engineering, stabilizer final calibration. Game die Greta, Kristen, rolls. 15. Arcana, Riftborn residue analysis. Steve, GM. Marcus, stabilizer output levels balance out, holding at 90%. Greta, the metasphere signatures indicate something unusual. It's faint, but not gone. There's a flicker, like something is shifting between layers of the vault. Marcus, IG. I can keep the stabilizer running, but this isn't over. The deeper we go, the worse it gets. Greta IG. There's a mark, not a crack, but something deeper in the breach glass. Like it's scarred. Old. Jonah IG. Scarred or not, I'm betting something down there doesn't want us leaving. And neither will the Syndicate if they catch wind of this. Narrative choices, player options. Investigate thoroughly. Jonah and Nick sweep the area while Marcus and Greta perform deeper scans. Risk of triggering latent metasphere anomalies or Syndicate intervention. Partial retreat. Return to the surface for rest and recalibration, leaving monitoring devices at the stabilizer. Potential vault instability during absence. Press forward. Descend deeper into Vault 43 immediately, disregarding the risk of remaining anomalies. Game Dynix, Jessica, rolls. 17, Stealth, Corridor Recon. Game Die Jonah, Bill, rolls. 18, Perception, Detect Riftborn traces. Narrative progression, Vault ripples. As Nyx and Jonah press forward, the corridor ahead bends unnaturally, the breach glass reflecting distorted versions of their movements. Jonah's breach rifle buzzes softly, signaling faint rift anomalies. Greta watches the stabilizer as faint symbols ripple across the breach glass floor, a glyph surfacing just long enough to flicker out. Steve, GM. Jonah, Nyx. As you approach the next junction, something shifts. For a moment, your reflections in the breach glass don't match your movements. It feels crowded. Nyx, IG. Reflections are off. Greta, you picking up anything on your end? Greta IG. Yes, but it's faint. Either we're not alone, or the vault's just remembering something. Jonah IG. That's comforting. Let's just hope the Syndicate isn't the first to see us coming out. Scroll session breakdown. Ol key loot. Breach glass fragment. Greta. Stabilizer residue that glows faintly under metasphere flux. Potentially an arcane focus. Anomaly detector calibration. Marcus. Enhanced stabilizer settings that improve breach anomaly detection for the next session. Encrypted Syndicate data shard. Jonah. A fragment of intercepted Syndicate data logged by Jonah's scanner. Requires decryption. Face with monocle key clues. Riftborn echoes flicker in breach glass near stabilizer nodes. Vault shows signs of unexplained metasphere disturbances beneath core layers. Crystal ball foreshadowing. Riftborn presence detected deeper in the vault. Syndicate may be tracking vault activity and stabilizer fluctuations. Next steps. Stabilize vault anomalies fully before proceeding further. Decode Syndicate data shard for additional clues. Prepare for Syndicate involvement in Vault 43 operations. Proceed to Part 9, Day 2 Wrap-Up and XP Distribution. Part 9, Wrap-Up and Reflection. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Simulacrum Studios, Post-Session Debrief. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 11:55 p.m. The metasphere projection fades, but echoes of glyph patterns shimmer faintly across the glass. Steve, GM, folds his notes with an unreadable expression, as if measuring what's left unsaid. Jonah, Bill, watches the flicker in the corner of his eye, catching his breach die as it tumbles through his fingers. Greta, Kristen, carefully tucks away her notes, but hesitates, tracing the symbol that appeared at the session's end. Marcus, Michael, cycles his stabilizer gauntlet off, though the faint hum continues for a second longer than it should. Nyx, Jessica, leans against the table, her blade resting quietly in her lap, the room steeped in an unusual calm. Steve, GM. Vault 43 remembers. Whatever you sealed, it isn't gone, it's just waiting. And now it knows your names. Marcus, Michael. System stable. That's more than we usually get. Greta, Kristen. Stable doesn't mean quiet. I felt something, like the vault's pulse quickened when we left. Jonah, Bill. Good. Means we're still interesting. But let's hope we don't overstay our welcome. Face with monocle character updates. Marcus. Michael logs stabilizer diagnostic reports showing faint fluctuations, suggesting deeper interference beyond the immediate vault core. His gauntlet hums softly even after shutdown, an anomaly he notes but doesn't mention to the others. Jonah. Bill keeps the breachglass shard close. Jonah. Bill keeps the breachglass shard close. His scanner logs metasphere anomalies flickering from it, intensifying when near the vault. The shard might not just be reacting, but calling to something below. Greta. Kristen cross-references the glyph near the stabilizer, noting strange divergences from Annunaki patterns. It resembles untranslated vault signatures. Syndicate tampering is suspected but unconfirmed. Nyx. Jessica. Her blade hums faintly near the breachglass shard, suggesting residual metasphere activity. She senses the vault's attention, as if marking them. Magnifying glass tilted left. Final clues of the day. Faint Riftborn presence. Stabilizer scans detect faint Riftborn energy signatures, contradicting closure reports. Glyph anomaly. Jonah's shard glyph doesn't match known Annunaki designs, hinting at external interference. Destabilized vault layers. A pulse from the vault's lower levels briefly registered as destabilizing flux. Marcus recognizes the pattern as a precursor to vault collapse. Syndicate watch. Greta discovers traces of encrypted syndicate data within stabilizer outputs. Monitoring may be ongoing. Ol key XP and loot breakdown. XP rewards. Marcus, Michael. 750 XP, stabilizer control. Jonah, Bill. 700 XP, Riftborn discovery and glyph study. Greta, Kristen. 725 XP, arcane analysis and glyph translation. Nyx, Jessica. 700 XP, recon and blade attunement. Bonus XP, plus 150 XP for group cohesion and stabilizer defense. Loot earned. Breachglass shard. Jonah hums with unknown glyphs. May unlock deeper vault areas. Ancient relay node. Greta embedded in vault diagnostics could access metasphere channels in future encounters. Encrypted stabilizer fragment. Marcus refinable for breach defense systems. Crystal ball foreshadowing and wrap up. Lingering Riftborn signatures. Energy patterns suggest anomalies remain deep below Vault 43. The Vault watches. Subtle metasphere disturbances hint at evolving Vault intelligence. Syndicate threat. Evidence of syndicate surveillance grows, hinting at future interference. Next steps. Monitor Vault stabilizer flux remotely. Investigate syndicate data for Vault anomaly clues. Prepare breach defenses for future Riftborn encounters. Proceed to Game Week 11, Day 3, Vault 43. Descent into lower levels.